It's now my pleasure to get the program started and introduce CSI's Executive Director, Reese Roth. Reese is the author of our reports, and prior to founding CSI, Reese co-founded and helped lead the nonprofit organization Climate Solutions for more than 15 years. Reese?
Thank you, Nan. Do I sound okay?
You do.
Okay. Thanks, Nan. Thanks, Orlando. Thanks, David. Thanks, Juan Carlos, for being here to help unveil this report. Very exciting moment for us. And thank you to the 50+ thought leaders and innovators from around the Pacific Northwest who we consulted, who we formally interviewed, or who helped review a substantive draft of the report. All the shortcomings in the report ultimately are mine, but you really contributed to helping make this report better. So thanks to all of you, many of whom are out there. So this has been about 18 months in the making, and I'm going to just do a flyover, 10-minute flyover, and then I'll look to David and Orlando and Juan Carlos to add some color. So I'm going to try to share the screen. Hopefully this will work. Let's see. Then I go to from beginning. I am not Mr. Technology, so far so good. Nan really covered, gave you background, an introduction to what Center for Sustainable Infrastructure is all about. Great 5 Big Goals for 2040 series. This is the fourth report. And I want to give a shout out to Patrick Mazza, who's been my co-author on this report series. So Patrick, I think you're out there. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your commitment to helping this report series really sing. Y'all out there in the audience should totally hire him for your next super innovative report that you're going to work on, because he's great. Okay, so this report offers an inspiring vision and a blueprint for the Pacific Northwest to really transform its solid waste management system by 2040, at a time now when waste leaders in this space are really grappling with some of the most profound challenges that they've faced in 4 decades. And I just want to note here that in some of our communications to publicize this webinar, we use the term broken waste system. And we got some helpful feedback, which I appreciate, from folks that are working in the field, that broken system, that could sound kind of like an indictment for the work that they're doing today. And I just want to apologize for that, because that's not our intent. And one thing that I've become very sensitized to in writing these 4 reports is that the people that are operating and maintaining, designing, building, constructing, expanding, modernizing our infrastructure systems are doing heroic work, unsung work. These systems are the lifeblood of our communities, and these folks get too little credit and recognition. So thanks to all of you out there who are making our infrastructure systems work and our communities work. So this blueprint is really forward-looking. It's about where do we go from here? How can we build a world-class system by 2040 that is everything that we want for our future? Super sustainable, resilient, affordable, integrated, and that contributes to broadly shared prosperity for all our communities, whether they're rich or poor, rural, urban, suburban, east, west, everybody included in that prosperous future. Now, the vision that is animating this blueprint is to build a world-class clean materials infrastructure and economy by 2040 that shrinks our environmental footprint dramatically while creating tens of thousands of good jobs. I think the public has embraced the recycling ethic for decades now, and they've done it for a couple of good, big, and very good reasons. They want to do right by the planet and right by people and right by their communities. And they don't like waste. So I think most people agree with my friend Orlando Simpson, who you'll hear from in a minute, when he says no resource, human, environmental, or monetary, should be wasted. It's just common sense. Now the blueprint is really an analog. There's an analog and model in the Pacific Northwest clean energy success. So the value proposition for both clean energy and the clean materials agenda are that both combine big improvements in environmental and health and climate performance with great opportunities to grow jobs, businesses, and industry. And policymakers can really help accelerate Pacific Northwest leadership by putting clean materials on policy par with clean energy. And the success that we've had over the, you know, I was involved 20 years ago, along with a lot of other people, in reframing clean energy as a great opportunity, economic opportunity for the Northwest. But the industry at that point was tiny and pretty boutique. But now the latest inventories found in 2018, 82,000 clean energy jobs in Washington, 55,000 clean energy jobs in Oregon. And a lot of those jobs are blue collar jobs. It's not just desk jockeys like me, you know, reading, typing, talking all the time. It's people out there doing real work. And that's what we can have for clean materials by 2040. But it's a time when people in this sector, our waste managers, are really dealing with some challenges, 4 big challenges we identified that are driving transformation of the waste sector, that points to, you know, potentially a new paradigm, a new framework. One, the failure of waste prevention strategies to actually prevent waste. Waste prevention, waste reduction, top of the solid waste hierarchy. In theory, it should be getting the most resources, the most attention, but in reality, we're not really, we're producing as much waste or more as we have for decades now. Second, the disruption of markets for recycled materials. When China implemented national sword, put the brakes on accepting contaminated recyclables from around the world, that had a huge disruptive effect on our recycling system here. Third, radical changes in packaging and other waste stream components. That's still going on. That's probably going to continue to go on. How do we deal with that? Fourth, and maybe most profound, is the recognition that most of the damage to the planet and our health happens before rather than after our stuff becomes waste and we toss it in the garbage and recycling bin. So just to dig in on that key realization a little bit, all the material and the stuff that we buy, all the products and the packing, came to be through earlier life cycles. And so extraction, manufacture, transport, construction, maintenance, refurbishing, demolition, recycling. Each material in all of our products has a life cycle. And this graph along the bottom are the greenhouse gas emissions for the products and packages that Oregonians buy and consume in a given year, and broken out by the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that per life cycle stage. And that little slice of red on the right is the disposal stage, when we toss the material into the waste management system. And so the greenhouse gases associated from there to how that's managed. Most of the impact is upstream. It comes earlier, in earlier life cycle stages. One thing that we don't really have as good a handle on as we need is the toxicity that is released along that life cycle. And so how toxic is our economy? And the reality is it's really toxic. There's a wide variety of toxic chemicals that now reside in all of our bodies. That's in our blood, in our urine. It's measured according to the CDC. And tragically, it's present in the umbilical cord blood of newborn infants and the breast milk of nursing mothers. So that's pretty concerning. Okay, going into the clean materials future, diamond solutions. This is a kind of a new metaphor to provide a refresh of what we have used, which is the solid waste hierarchy, which maybe doesn't work anymore for a few different reasons, but this metaphor, diamond solutions, these are the solutions where the bulk of our resources and effort and investment will be concentrated in the clean materials future. And these are not meant to be stacked, one more important than the other. All are important, and they best work together and are designed together. So preventing waste at all stages, getting longer life and more use from products, optimizing recycling, developing clean production and processing hubs. We've got a lot of real world innovators in the Pacific Northwest who are already pioneering the clean materials economy. We profiled a number of these in the report, so I really refer you to the report. Great stories here. They're showing the way. So what do we need? One thing that the blueprint recommends that we need is actually new framework legislation to build a truly world-class system, a comprehensive refresh of framework legislation that was adopted in the 70s and 80s. It's been 30, 40 years. Time to relook at that. And that should be grounded in success metrics that are the North Star for the blueprint, the five big goals for 2040. These performance metrics are super important to know whether we're getting there. So we need metrics for where we want to get in 2040, and we need performance metrics so that all of us can demonstrate that we're making progress to get to those long-term goals. The first two goals are really the overriding goals for what defines environmental and economic excellence in the clean materials economy. So shrinking the health and environmental impacts of our stuff by 80% by 2040 on a life cycle basis, and building a world-class industry jobs cluster in the clean materials solution. The other three goals are really ways of getting there. Finally, cross-cutting policies. These are super cool cross-cutting policies that came out of the conversations with folks. The blueprint proposes a strategic portfolio of policies that would go under framework legislation. I'm not going to try to go into these now because my time's up, but again, I refer you to the report and we can certainly talk about it more. So thank you very much, appreciate it. I think back to you, Nan, and I think, yeah.
Thank you, Reese. Thank you. Our next speaker is David Alloway, and David is a senior policy analyst with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality's Materials Management Program. And at DEQ, David leads projects related to sustainable consumption and production, materials management, and greenhouse gases. David?
Thanks so much, Nan and Reese. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, okay, thanks. So hello everyone out there in cyberspace. DEQ, if you're not familiar with us, is Oregon's state environmental agency and is one of many co-funders of CSI's research in this new report. We're pleased to see you all today and share a few thoughts about the report. You know, when the scientific community uncovers new information, there can be a lag of up to several decades before that information finds its way into mainstream public opinion. Public policy, in turn, often lags that public opinion. And many of the policies we have today, at least when it comes to waste and materials, were largely designed several decades ago. In the 1980s, the Pacific Northwest and the nation had a disposal crisis. Many of our landfills were unsafe. New federal laws caused many landfills to close, and this created a perception that we would soon run out of places to put our garbage. Those problems have largely been solved, but our policies and public opinion remain somewhat stuck in the past, focusing on landfill aversion and recycling as an ultimate goal. We'd be much better served if we treated recycling as a means to achieve some higher order goals, as opposed to the end goal itself. If the landfill problem was yesterday's news, today we're facing new challenges, or in some cases, some old problems that have recently become much more acute. We have a global climate system, including oceans, that's in crisis. Ecosystems and biological diversity are in peril. Toxic chemicals are found in our air and water, our homes, and as Reese pointed out, even the blood of unborn babies still in the womb. At the root of many of these challenges are materials, both the unsustainable quantity in which they are produced and consumed, and the harmful ways in which they're made. Recycling remains society's go-to solution when it comes to materials and waste. And in the last 10 years, we've learned much more about recycling. We've learned that not all recycling is the same, that recycling can be done well, and it can also be done poorly. And that while recycling is beneficial and we need more and better recycling, recycling by itself is insufficient. For example, Reese shared Oregon's consumption-based greenhouse gas inventory, which shows that materials contribute about 41% of our state's collective global climate footprint. We need to reduce those emissions by upwards of 90%. Recycling, maximized recycling, might reduce those emissions by an additional 3 to 5%, roughly. So recycling is helpful, but it cannot be our only solution. We need some additional tools in our toolbox. In this country, most of the environmental impacts of most materials are a consequence of production, not disposal. So we need materials to be produced in less harmful ways, and we need to be using materials more wisely, including the often forgotten priorities of reduce and reuse. We also have a materials economy whose benefits are not equally shared. Basic needs are not being met for some people here in Oregon and Washington. Meeting those needs is going to require an increase in consumption by some, even as society as a whole reduces our collective impacts. Not only is our economy not sustainable environmentally, it also concentrates opportunity in the hands of some and at the expense of others. So solving these interrelated problems is going to require looking at the impacts of materials from a broader and more holistic perspective. The new report from CSI calls out the limitations of our old metrics, performance measures that focus only on tons of material sent to landfill or not. To unlock the potential to achieve larger, more systemic, and more beneficial changes, we need a broader method of assessing materials and programs. The new report from Reese and his team is important because it identifies that, as well as several other essential reforms. The report is timely because both Oregon and Washington are currently considering significant policy changes that would change how we manage our wastes. The scope of the current discussion in both states is broader than we've ever seen in the past, yet it is smaller than what CSI suggests in its new report is necessary. So this new report is an important marker, a compass even, that has potential of guiding both states to a more sustainable, healthy, and equitable future. Many of CSI's recommendations, when you look at them, will disrupt existing systems. Some will require very significant policy and program development. But the value here is that CSI has taken an unusually fresh and hard-nosed look at the evidence. It's found that our current systems and policies are outdated and inadequate to deal with the magnitude of the problems now at hand. CSI has proposed a package of solutions to reposition the Northwest as a global clean economy leader. So a big shout out, Reese, to you, Patrick, and the rest of your team for your deep thinking on this topic. And I'd encourage everyone to check out the report in more detail. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. Great comments, thank you. Our next speaker is Juan Carlos Gonzalez. Juan Carlos serves as Metro Counselor for Oregon Metro District 4, and he's focused on lots of issues, including advancing economic justice, addressing the growing affordable housing crisis, investing in world-class public transportation systems, reforming the full spectrum of our solid waste and recycling system to meet the needs of the region and our environment, and ensuring that our land use system is equitable and responsive to future growth. Juan Carlos.
Hi, Dan. Good morning. Thank you for the very kind introduction. I'm pleased and honored to be a part of the webinar today. As I was when the CSI team first asked to interview me last year, and getting to connect with Reese in my first year in office, it was a lot of fun. I'm quoted in the report saying, "I hope there's a point in time where we have the policy and systems in place to know how we will manage and utilize the materials within every product that is created in the economy." And in council work sessions and in council meetings, when I speak with my colleagues, I often say that I would love for every single product that enters the economy that we have a plan for how it exits the economy that truly captures all of its value. I recognize it's an ambitious goal, but the people of Oregon and Washington who are attending the webinar today have laid a strong foundation for putting the policies and systems in place. And I believe that the ideas and actions identified in the report will accelerate the efforts. And of course, I'm very grateful for the staff at Metro that have helped me learn and help us advance this work as well. So a lot of that foundational work has been done by the organization I have the honor of representing. Metro is our regional government for the greater Portland area. Our 2030 regional waste plan, which the Metro Council approved last year, was informed by some of the same inspired work that we see in the CSI blueprint, including Oregon DEQ's 2050 materials management vision. The materials management approach is critical because it directs us towards real outcomes, reduce environmental and human health impacts with a particular emphasis on climate change. We don't have the time or resources to take actions that don't get us significant benefits. So we need policies that demand more of the consumer product industry on behalf of our residents, and we need programs in place that allow us to respond effectively to the conditions that we can't control. If you're familiar with Metro, you know that all of the work of our agency is guided by our 2016 strategic plan to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that our 2030 regional waste plan is built on a racial equity framework. To me, it's critical that the materials management work outlined in the CSI blueprint be focused on those who have least well served by our consumption-based society and the solid waste system. Communities of color must not just experience fewer or lesser impacts as a result of the actions we take, but must more equitably share in the benefits produced, particularly the economic outcomes. I take a particular interest, therefore, in seeing how the clean materials industry portions of the CSI blueprint can lead with racial equity. Finally, I'm pleased that this report calls for more and deeper collaborative efforts across local jurisdictions, states, and provinces. Metro is necessarily collaborative. We encompass 24 cities and 3 counties. Collaborative work is hard, as I'm sure we all know, but it is usually more effective and more efficient, and it positions us to have more consistent and equitable outcomes. I'm also aware of the need to do this material management work with those who want to see it get it done. So I'm excited that the proposals for the people, businesses, and governments of Oregon, Washington, California, and British Columbia can help us work closer together. Thank you everyone for your work, and I'm excited to see what comes next. As a policymaker, as a lifelong resident of the Portland metro area, and as someone that deeply loves and believes in the Pacific Northwest ability to be progressive champions and a role model for the rest of the world.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. Thank you. Our final speaker is Orlando Simpson. Orlando is the Chief Executive Officer of the City of Roses Disposal and Recycling. City of Roses is a materials management organization that specializes in waste collection, materials processing, and demolition services. He's worked to solidify the company as a leader in the sustainable waste and recycling field with a strong emphasis on the circular economy. Orlando, the floor is yours.
Floor is mine. Well, first off, I wanted to thank David and Councilor Juan Carlos Gonzalez and Nan and Reese and Lisa and the rest of the squad that put all this together. I'm sure it was a lot of work, a lot of effort, and I have a lot of respect for everybody that's on this call that's sharing their thoughts and observations about this particular topic. And I'm really optimistic about where we're going to be going in the Pacific Northwest in the near future as it relates to waste and materials management. I wanted to go back just a little bit and just kind of for those folks on the call that aren't aware of City of Roses, which otherwise its name has been converted to CORE. We are a locally owned solid waste and recycling company, to make it simple. Been around almost 25 years, and we're definitely looking at providing a different perspective of how people perceive waste and thinking about it from a more broader lens, where we're not just referring to things people toss out in their trash can, but thinking about it from the perspective of societal waste and how it impacts all our lives. And I know that takes us down an interesting road, but I think one of the things that's really important as it ties back to this conversation is that everything's interconnected. And as much as we try to silo conversations around whether it's waste or climate change or economic justice or things like that, it all really ties back together one way or another. And there are some images, I think, earlier in the report that the Reese put up, and it talked about, just from the part of manufacturing to the transportation to the consumption and demolition, et cetera. Everything is all interconnected. And so we're trying to look at just this term waste and interconnect it with society, because if we're not diligent and not thoughtful about how we manage our own waste, how are we going to be thoughtful and diligent in how we manage other things that could be essentially wasteful or hindering our progression as a civilization going forward. So I just wanted to put that out there. And so we're a local waste company. As far as I know, the only African-American owned solid waste recycling company in the country that is semi-vertically integrated. And if anybody on this call has another one that they're aware of, please send them my way, because I've been looking for years for that individual or those organizations. And additionally, we're the only B Corp solid waste company in the entire country as well. As in an effort to kind of show our commitment to the circular economy and the overall triple bottom line, it was near and dear to my heart to ensure that we're actually focusing on and being managed, I guess you can say regulated, audited by a third-party group to ensure that we're achieving outside the box metrics and targets that will ensure that we're actually providing more beneficial outcomes to our community. Hiring local, hiring diverse, making sure that, you know, we're spending dollars locally with other small businesses. We hire a lot of small businesses. So we're always trying to reinvest back into the community, because without the community, we're nothing. We're just another business. And I believe, and my father always instilled in us, that you always take care of the people in which you work around. So it's part of the DNA of our company. But just to take on a little bit further, these closed loop systems conversations are going to be really prudent as we go into the 21st century. As Reese alluded to earlier, I genuinely do believe that nothing should be wasted in society. And so as we start looking at waste, what can we be doing differently and innovatively with waste that essentially provides an upcycled opportunity to create a new green collar economy for the 21st century? And as somebody who has a facility in what would be referred to as a blighted community, we feel that it is in our interest, as we grow and scale as a business within the community, with the community, that we hire with our community, and we start figuring out how do we tap into the new green collar economy, because we are firm believers that the future of manufacturing is really going to be predicated on waste being the raw material. And so there is an opportunity here, I think, that we have in front of us to look at waste in a way as it creating a new economic opportunity for folks that are coming in that have probably low skills, and provide job training pathways and pipelines to provide them conduits to essentially independence and building more wealth for themselves and their families. My father started off just driving a truck for the city of Portland. And once he decided to take a leap of faith and get into the industry, which was nearly almost 25 years ago, it's definitely paid off for him, I would say, that particular risk. But obviously things all have to come into alignment. But I think that we are at a place right now in society where I think the Pacific Northwest really could hone in on becoming an international leader, and really trying to turn into what we've embraced as a really environmentally strong ethos in this particular part of the country, and take it a step further while leading with equity in a way that's going to uplift human capital while taking care of our planet. And it's an approach that I think a lot of people get distracted by as it relates to climate change. But when you think about it, if humans didn't exist, climate change wouldn't matter. And so we have to make sure that we're thinking about the human capital so that humans can actually provide the, I guess you would say, the more value to the community overall, so that we can sustain ourselves. But we cannot provide value, all of us humans, if we're not treated equitably or equally, and to a certain regard. And so using the waste industry as a conduit to try to address some of our biggest challenges that we see in society as it relates to our environmental challenges, our social challenges, and even the economic disparities, I think is going to be a perfect platform for us to expand the conversation around waste, and the way in which CSI and other organizations in the Pacific Northwest can talk about waste in the future as a catalyst to actually create sustainable ecosystems. So that was really what I wanted to share with folks today, and I'll pass it back to you, Nan.
Great, Orlando, thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to each of our speakers for your insightful and very timely comments. I'm going to invite anybody in the virtual room to submit questions. And again, if you'd like to do that, please click on the Q&A button. On my screen, it's on the bar at the bottom. Right now, it looks like it's under Orlando. Click there, write your question, and please specify to whom you'd like your question addressed if you have a particular person in mind. And again, if you're a member of the media, would you please just indicate media before you write your question. Thank you. And I am going to, I see that we do have some questions. The first one, Reese, is for you. How much overlap is there between the new report and the Pacific Coast Collaborative?
My understanding is the Pacific Coast Collaborative, which is kind of an alliance of convened by the governors of California, Oregon, Washington, and the Premier of British Columbia, that they've got a very aggressive focus on food waste, transforming that, the problems of food waste. And so that would be great alignment. And that's a slice of the overall clean materials kind of vision and economy. So I think, you know, we've initiated some conversations with the PCC to explore what kind of opportunities to scale up that their efforts in this space could look like.
Thank you. And another one for you, did the Industrial Symbiosis Strategy report that CSI and NISP Canada prepared last year for the Washington Department of Commerce help inform the findings of this current study and the current report? And you might want to share what NISP stands for, please.
NISP, National Industrial Symbiosis Program, which I think began in the UK and it's spread to a number of other countries. And I just, don't get me going on industrial symbiosis because I get super excited and I could, you know, gobble up all our time here. But that's basically a concept developed in Denmark. We've brought on a series of delegations to Denmark. We've brought state legislators from Washington State, 26 of them, half Republican, half Democrats, to Denmark to visit the industrial symbiosis projects that are going on there. Basically, it's the idea that the waste from one industry becomes a resource for another, and that you power this with renewable energy and utilize waste material, waste water, and waste heat in a way that really reduces the environmental impact of production at the same time as you generate tremendous economic value. So we're seeing a number of pilot kind of projects emerge in communities in Washington and Oregon around industrial symbiosis. I think it's a key concept that can help inform the part of the clean materials agenda that is developing clean production and processing hubs, one of those 4 diamond solutions.
Thank you, Reese. Our next question is for David. What are anyone's thoughts on regulating packaging more, on products themselves, as well as packaging during transit and delivery? That's a good question.
Yeah, thanks, Nan. And the question seems to be around packaging, but let's extend it to products as well. Because society loves to hate on packaging. Packaging is the stuff we bring home from the store that we don't want and becomes waste. Environmentally, most of the damage is associated with the products, not the packaging. So let's talk about products and packaging together, I think. Consumers and individuals cannot bring society into a sustainable state single-handedly. There's very, very important changes that are needed that only producers can make. And what we have today is a really unlevel playing field where there are some producers who are trying their very best at significant cost. We have others who are engaged in some light efforts, some that are involved in greenwashing, and some that are sitting back and doing nothing. So we have a landscape consisting of a bunch of voluntary initiatives that are generally inadequate and inconsistent. If we are going to achieve a sustainable future, there will be some necessary role for regulation.
Thank you very much, David. Orlando, and or Juan Carlos, do you have comments on that question? Anything you'd like to add? Okay, then let me move on. And this is a question for Reese. What do you think will be the impact of COVID on future product design and manufacturing and the expanded use of single-use materials rather than more durable materials, especially in the food and medical areas? Good, for timely question.
It is a super timely question. And I don't think I have great answer. I kind of want to hand this off to Juan Carlos as a policymaker. I know he's been hearing from constituents a lot about this. So Juan Carlos, do you mind taking that one?
Yeah, I would love the question to be repeated just so I answer it fully.
Yes, absolutely. What do you think will be the impact of COVID on future product design and manufacturing and the expanded use of single-use materials rather than more durable materials, and especially with regard to food and medical?
Well, I love that question because it comes from Roy Brower, who happens to be the director of waste prevention and environmental services at Metro. So great question, Roy. And in any other circumstance, I would totally be leaning on you for the answer. I think for me, the fundamental part of the question that I wanted to take apart is the impact of COVID in general on a lot of the habits and behaviors that we have right now, or at least on a macro scale with residents and how we interact with that. I certainly hear a lot of angst from my constituents that have a desire and an urge to continue recycling and an uncertainty, excuse me, around that. I would say that I would wait to look for data and obviously to see how systems evolve over time. Unfortunately, I don't know what the impact of COVID is going to be. I would certainly hope that as we transition to this new normal and either supply chains are disrupted or many of us work remotely and from home, we look to use a lot more long-term durable goods. But that's just an inclination in terms of what I would like to see. But certainly the question of the impact on COVID is something that policymakers we have to think about on every single sector, whether it's public transit and how we access buses, whether it's single-use plastics and materials of that like. So definitely something I'm concerned about, especially with the added takeout, people eating at home and going to carry out and things like that. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, but definitely something that we need to consider.
It's a big topic. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Orlando, question for you. Do you have ideas or concerns about partnerships or actions among governments or between governments and the private sector to improve waste management outcomes for communities and companies? Can you see ways to do that?
To be honest, I think that's probably the pathway forward, just because the waste industry and the technologies that are available out there are so capital intensive. It's probably going to require more of a P3 type of structure where you can achieve bigger, broader developments, because I mean, the standardized process in which you transfer waste or recycle waste is just in a building, and processing lines, balers, things like that, granulators or grinders, all those types of options, those are already there. But the question is what's next? And I believe the amount of intergovernmental arrangements with private sector as it relates to utilities, as it relates to transportation systems, as it relates to open space, green space, as it relates to, scientists, engineers, so higher education, like it's going to take a consortium of organizations to work collectively to try to create a new paradigm around how we manage waste. It's not going to be a siloed approach, again, where the government just kind of stands on one side and regulates and the private sector stands on one side and processes. I think it's going to have to be more of a uniform approach where there's shared values, and then the public can hold those entities accountable for those shared values. And I think that's the way in which a lot of governments are going to need to function in the future, which is a lot more transparency. But the first step is you have to rebuild trust. A lot of governments, and I think what we're seeing now in society is that a lot of people are just tired of governments because there's no trust there, as well as large corporate institutions. And they're just massive bureaucracies, and they're very complex to understand. And so by simplifying an approach that comes down to the level of the community and allows the community to be involved and engage and understand what the upfront investment is and what the downstream outcomes will be that benefit their quality of life, I think that's how you can have successful, big, innovative projects that are going to enable us to get to a more clean economy and be a little bit more sustainable as it comes to materials management.
Thank you very much. Thanks. This question is for David. David, can you elaborate on producer responsibility 2.0? How are we going to get ahead when the fossil fuel industry is focused on doubling plastics production in the next decade? How do we reduce waste when more tools, devices, and electronics are no longer repairable?
Oh, wow, there's several questions there. Let me try to be brief. So specific to the idea of producer responsibility 2.0, what we currently have is more than 100 laws in this country across various states, extended producer responsibility that generally extend the responsibility of producers to include some type of responsibility at the end of life of their materials. So both Oregon and Washington have laws for electronics waste, for example, where the producers of televisions and computers share in the responsibility for managing those materials safely at end of life. That's producer responsibility 1.0. The next generation of producer responsibility needs to build on that and expand it and bring more tools to the toolbox. So it's not all about recycling and end of life, but there are ways through policy in which producers can be engaged and required to share in greater responsibility for prevention and for reuse, for dematerialization, decarbonization, detoxification. And one of the great things about the CSI report is it outlines some of those additional opportunities, because whoever asked this question is spot on if they're implying that recycling alone will not solve the problems of perpetually increasing material production and use. If all we do is recycle more and more as we make more and more, then we will have a system of unsustainable circularity. And we need a system that's circular and sustainable. The last question was around how do we reduce waste when more devices and durable goods are no longer repairable? There are some policy options there as well. In Europe, they've explored the idea of mandatory warranties and extended warranties. And a movement that's gaining a lot of traction in the US right now is the right to repair movement. I believe there will be legislation introduced in numerous states next year that would require, as a first step, producers to make available the diagnostic codes, the tools, the components, and the information that is necessary to repair and extend the life of our increasingly wired and electronic durable goods.
Great, David, thank you. There's yet another question for you. To create a regional approach and solutions to the issues of consumption and disposal, are there discussions going on between DEQ and DOE in Washington State regarding alignment of state regulations, such as bottle redemption programs?
Sure. Department of Ecology in Washington and DEQ in Oregon, we talk with each other all the time. But I think what this question might be missing is there's an assumption implied there that it's the state regulatory agencies that are designing the policy. That's not really the case. The policy is designed by the legislators. And the conversation that we probably need more of is we need more discussion between the actual policymakers, the legislators, because if you want to have alignment between states, you need conversation happening at that level, not just the bureaucracies.
Thank you. So here's a question for anyone who wants to jump in and take it. What are the largest political and public policy changes that stand between clean materials vision and its implementation? Anybody want to take that?
I'll jump in.
Thanks.
Can you ask the question one more time just to make sure?
I sure can. What are the largest political and public policy challenges that stand between the clean materials vision and its implementation? So what are the barriers to implementation?
I mean, the honest truth is the cost effectiveness of landfilling. Outside of that, let's just say all of a sudden there was a policy that just said no more landfilling. People would be forced to figure it out. It's no different than if someone on this call, their child got sick with COVID and were obviously struggling to survive. I would guarantee, or maybe not a child, even a close, husband, wife, family member, whatever it may be. But the point is you would become an expert on COVID in a matter of probably a few days. You wouldn't sleep, you'd study, you'd research, you'd flip over everything, and you would dive so deep into figuring out how to try to get out of this nightmare, you would find a way. And so all that has to come back to is a zeal and desire and a concerted effort and an assertive pushback from lobbying interests that essentially are predicated on financial gain as opposed to environmental and social justice. And so when you start peeling back that onion, that's just the bare name. I mean, I'll attest to it. It's more cost effective to landfill, but is that the solution for the future? No, it's not. It's not the solution. It's a lazy answer. It's the easy way out. It's the microwave, right? I don't want to spend my time cooking the food in the oven because it takes too long. Just pop it in the microwave. It's easier. So I think we have to challenge ourselves to think outside the box, and even when things are hard and complicated, not run away from it, but lean into it. Because the more you lean into something that's complex, the easier it becomes, and then the more you get, coalition around that. So I just think we have to challenge ourselves a little bit more and have the zeal of wanting to go down a direction that everybody's in alignment with.
Okay, thank you.
Just to build on that.
Yes.
Chime in on that one too. Reese, do you want to go first?
Just real briefly, because Orlando's point at the end folds right into one I wanted to make, which I think one of the key barriers is that if we're thinking too small, if we lack an animating long-term vision about where we're going that can inspire broad sectors of people to engage, if we end up fighting for change as just environmentalists working separately from the industry, working separately from economic development people and people working to bring up the lives of people in their communities, we can't get there. Only by aligning effort, as Orlando said, and building those kind of coalitions around a vision that serves all those interests can we really get somewhere worth going. So we need that inspiring vision and we need that blueprint. So that's what this report really tries to provide.
Thanks, Reese. Juan Carlos.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, to add on to that, this is kind of the crux of the conversation and the policy discussion around climate change. And what we have is a vicious cycle of public opinion and consumerism, driven also by an extraction mindset of the planet with oils and plastics and all that, and of course supply chains eagerly hoping to supply all of the demand that exists. So with this vicious cycle, there's a lack of accountability and responsibility both on the consumer side and on the producer side. And I think a lot of the recycling efforts that we've taken on over the last few decades have definitely helped increase the consciousness of the public but we need to do a lot more in terms of increasing producer responsibility as well. And ultimately, this conversation around a vision is really to disrupt the normal, the status quo of what we're experiencing right now. The biggest barrier is always going to be money. Is always going to be the enhanced burden and hardship of buying a quote unquote clean material versus a virgin plastic or something that's a lot quote unquote cheaper to make. And we need to disrupt that by showing the public what the externalized costs of a landfill or of shipping something abroad where we think it's going to be taken care of when in reality it might end up in our oceans, etc., is disrupting that narrative about accountability both on the consumer side and on the producer side, and then making the case for why we need to internalize those externalized costs. And I think that's the way that I view it in terms of a policymaker. And I know there are several steps that we can take, but in expanded producer responsibility, a lot of those things that are detailed in the report and also detailed in Metro's 2030 regional waste plan are going to be important. But again, it comes down to those big lobbies, those big industries that are behind these cheap plastics that are able to, throw out a few taglines over commercials or the airstreams, and help people and make people feel unsafe or fearful of their bottom line. We need to be able to radically transform that.
Thank you all for your answers. We have 4 or 5 more questions, but I also want to be sure that we are able to end this at 1 o'clock because I know that people probably have other commitments. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending, participating, submitting really thoughtful questions, and remind you again that we will answer your questions. If we didn't get to them, we will provide answers, and we'll have the questions and answers on the CSI website. And we will also, of course, have the report, which you can get by going to a link to it by going to the chat room right now, but it certainly will be available on our website. And we'd also like you to consider taking the short survey, the questions that we have that will help us think about what directions we need to move to make sure that the recommendations in this report are implemented across the region and beyond. So thank you so much to all our speakers. If we could, there ought to be an applause button at the bottom of these things, but there isn't as far as I know. But consider that you're all hearing applause. And I am now going to turn this back to Reese so that he can wrap it up and share some information about what will happen next. Reese.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess I'm thinking back 20 years to when clean energy was just a kind of a new idea, an attempt to reframe this, to marry economic opportunity along with environmental urgency into a new vision and strategy. And 20 years later, how that's blossomed and grown in ways that we could never have imagined. And the coalitions and partnerships that have developed to make that happen among large sectors of society that have built the political will to change the policy framework, built the business capability to scale up these companies and capacities. That's been pretty extraordinary to watch. And so now I'm imagining in 2040 that we have a follow-up webinar, and David and I think David and I would love to still be around then. I'm sure if Juan Carlos, if we could get a commitment from you now, even though you'll probably be governor at that point, that you would take a little time for this follow-up webinar in Orlando with your running $1 billion company. I know you're going to be busy, but if you just take an hour in 2040 for the follow-up webinar, we can sort of recount how we were able to bring together the coalitions and build the partnerships to make this clean materials vision a reality, and to make the Pacific Northwest a state-of-the-art world leader in pioneering that future. So I think, where do we go from here? CSI is really a think and do tank, and we've done a lot of thinking in partnership with dozens and dozens and dozens of the real innovators in this field. And so we want to turn now to the do part and sit down and work with all of the folks out there who care about this, who can get behind the vision and figure out together what can we achieve, what's practical, what really aligns with your interests and values, and how can we collaborate to achieve this kind of optimizing of prosperity, real sustainability, social equity and opportunity to lift up everybody in our society, all our communities. How can we come together? So that's going to be the work going ahead, is really trying to build partnerships and coalition to advance new policy frameworks, to really advance economic development strategies that can do this. And so I really welcome the opportunity to work with all of you out there that are listening here to move this forward into the future. So Nan, I think I would leave it at that. I don't know if you want to say final words, just to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would just like to say two things. First of all, thank you again, three things. Thank you to the speakers. And thank you to all of you. I think there are literally more than 150 people on here today. Thank you for taking the time to participate. And we hope that you'll continue your participation in the work that CSI is doing on many fronts. We're trying to help the region think across things that have been siloed for years, which is taking a systemic approach to change, and also building really strong and effective collaborations. I am very excited to see this new report, and I want to congratulate Reese and Patrick again on putting it together, and thank everyone who helped to support it. And I wish you all a very good day. Go out and enjoy the sunshine.